and welcome to another episode of Notes and Notables with your host, Trenton Petrie. Let's get ready to dive into another day's worth of educational topics. So come on in, take a seat, school is in session.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hey everybody, this is Notes and Notables with your host, Trenton Petrie, and our co-host, Abby Sobieski. Hi Abby, how's it going?
It's going good.
Great. Today, we're going to dive into this thing that our orchestra teacher here, Mr. Funes, who I'll introduce here in a second, is really big into. It's called Viola da Gamba. I'm looking forward to this episode, seeing as how I don't know anything other than it's called Viola da Gamba. Mr. Funes, Pedro, thanks for joining us and talking to us about this new medium of music.
Well, thank you for having me on your episode today, and I'm looking forward to talking about this instrument.
Me too, because like I said, I don't know anything about it, and so can you just give us a brief, like, how'd you start Viola da Gamba? How did you come about like that medium in your life?
So it was in 2006. I was at U of H. I was studying double bass performance, and I got to a point where I was tired of playing orchestra music. I talked to the musicologist at the university, and I said, I want to play in the Collegium Musicum. And he said, well, I don't need a bass player. I need a gamba player. And so I said, what's that? He says, Google it, look it up, and find all that. And so I did, and I discovered there is a Houston group of gamba players. There was about like 6 or 7 at that time, and they, with open arms, offered me lessons to take lessons and invited me to their like little reading sessions and all that stuff. And that's how I got hooked into it, because I saw what social things you can do with the instrument, all that stuff. And as a bass player, you never usually get the melody. And so it was quite nice to play an instrument.
It's the tuba of the band.
Yeah, exactly.
It was quite nice to like, oh, look, I can actually play something melodic and all that stuff. So it was like a different thing, and I've been hooked since then.
So you've been doing it ever since basically when you got introduced to it in college?
Yes.
Okay. And then did you start at your last job in Humboldt ISD? Did you start a Viola da Gamba ensemble there?
I did.
Okay. And then, so the one here in Deer Park, can you tell us real quick before we start, like it's students, obviously, right?
Yes.
And then what are their grade levels?
So the grade levels are 7th and 8th grade, and then I have a few in 9th grade this year that started last year. And so the requirement to be in the ensemble is you have to play an orchestra instrument, because whatever you learn there can transfer easily to the gamba.
Okay, so basically 7th, 8th, and 9th graders.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm assuming that you're hoping it grows, like once they become 12th, 11th, and 10th graders, then you'll have 9, 8, and 7, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yes. In the past, and I've done this before at different high schools and all that, the kids that go into college and all that stuff still want to play the instrument. So like, the love is always there.
And to your knowledge, how many school districts have a Viola da Gamba contingency?
This is the only one.
That's
Wow.
right. The only one in the state of Texas that we know of that has a Viola da Gamba ensemble for students. Okay, good. All right, so time to get into the nit and gritty and the real information. So can you just talk to us about what Viola da Gamba is, like what the instruments look like, how many strings and all that kind of stuff, the sound profile of all the different ones. Just kind of give us an overview of what Viola da Gamba is.
All right. So the Viola da Gamba comes in 3 different sizes. There's called a treble viol, a tenor viol, and a bass viol. All of them have 6 strings, and all of them have frets. The reason for the frets is so the instrument can sound like open strings, everything like that. Back in the day, it was like, sounds like the human voice, and that's the imitation you get from the instrument. There's also another size called an alto viol that's available, and that has like an open B-flat string and all that stuff, which a lot of orchestra people will be like, why is that a thing? But it is a thing back in the day.
So this is all Renaissance music, right?
Yes.
Okay, so so these are basically period instruments of the Renaissance.
Yes.
Stringed Renaissance period instruments.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Cool. So what's like the sound profile compared to your typical orchestra?
All right, so let's think about this compared to orchestra. So the treble is the smaller one, and that's kind of like your violin sound. The tenor is like your viola, and then the bass is kind of your cello on there. I forgot to mention there's a bigger one called the violone, and that's kind of your double bass version of that. So you have all sizes kind of compared to orchestra, what we have in consorts.
And then what does Viola da Gamba mean? Like, what's the meaning behind that?
All right, so Viola da Gamba means the viol of the leg. So you hold it between your legs. There is no end pin. And then, so if we want to go like all fancy and everything.
Yes, because we're beginners. We have no clue what's going on.
The official name for the violin and viola is called Viola da Braccio, because you play that on your shoulder and I'll pull it.
Sounds like an Italian dish I got one time at
It does.
TMEA.
Right. So that's the comparison. So you have the two different viols, the braccio and then the Viola da Gamba we hold between your legs.
So there's no pin. You literally have to hold it with your leg muscles.
With your calves. Yep.
Oh man.
It builds your
It
leg
doesn't-
muscles.
Woof. And are they all three like that?
Yes,
So it's just the size of the body of the instrument that's different.
that's correct.
But all of them you hold with your legs.
Correct.
Woof. Okay. Well, that's interesting. And I'm assuming, is the bow relatively the same as in orchestra, regular orchestra?
Yes, it's the same bow, but like as I always introduce it to students, you get to touch the bow hair.
Oh, yeah. Is it made out of the same stuff?
Yes,
Okay.
it is. Same,
Okay.
Exactly.
So, man, that's interesting. That so in your group here in Deer Park, what are the instrument like? What are the instrument? What is the instrumentation that you have?
In the middle school version right now that I have like 4 trebles, 2 tenors, and 4 basses. And in the high school, I have 3 trebles, 2 tenors, and 2 basses.
Okay. And can you just talk about real quick before we continue, since we're starting this, and one of the reasons why I wanted to have him on now instead of in a couple weeks from now, is because next week, I believe, right?
Yes.
On Monday the 10th, on February 10th, Pedro is going to be presenting with the Viola da Gamba, and I'm going to let him talk about that, what it is, and what he's presenting and all, and talk about his presentation, which is going to be streamed in the UK. So can you just talk real quick about that?
All right. So the presentation I'm doing on Monday is going to be about my program that I've been doing since 2015 on introducing gamba to the students in public schools. The first time I started this, it was high school, and that was like Oak Ridge High School up in Conroe. And then I went into teach at Wood Creek Middle School, and I brought it to the middle school with me, because I have like 18 gambas that come with me that
So you own?
well, no.
Oh, okay.
They're on loan.
Oh.
Okay.
And then people donate them to me because they see what I do. So I have all these instruments that come with me. And then when I came here to Bonnet last year, I brought them with me, and I've been doing this. And so the kids are always doing this very well. They learn music very quickly and all that stuff. And so people are interested to see what I bring to the table, what gets these kids hooked to the music, and why are they always sounding so great and nice tones and all that stuff. And so that's what mostly my project's going to be, presentation for Monday.
And who were you presenting to?
This is the Viola da Gamba Society of the United Kingdom.
Okay, so he's going to be using one of our the Gaines Mason Auditorium, which is over at our 9th grade campus. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, and they're going to have cameras, and they've got microphones, they've got the works. I mean, we've pulled out. Apparently, the district has pulled out all stops, because it's not often that little old Deer Park gets to have a program that's like going to be zoomed in from the United Kingdom. Maybe the King will be there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, he can play God Save the King on Viola da Gamba. All right. So hey, when we get back after this introduction here that we had on Viola da Gamba, when we get back, we're going to start talking about kind of the historical journey and about the history of Viola da Gamba, where it came from, and all that kind of good stuff, and trying to get into like how it's played as far as like bowing techniques and things like that. So we'll be back in just a few minutes. Hang on. All right, and now we're back, and so we're going to get into a little bit of the background and history of Viola da Gamba. So, Pedro, can you just talk to us a little bit? And I know this is the musicology in you that's about to come out and play. and now back to it'd be music history semester 1, and that was, I will say, that was my favorite semester of music history. I love all like the chanting and the Baroque music. That was all great. Second semester, that's like that was like, this is a tangent. That was a large piece of like music history. I mean, like that second semester was literally from, I think it was, and at Texas was like Baroque all the way to almost Stravinsky.
Yeah.
And then I hated third semester music history, which was basically Stravinsky till now, like 1941 era until present day of that time. I hated. I'm sorry. If there's like third semester music history lovers out there,
Stravinsky.
yeah. Well, I mean, Stravinsky's fine. It's really everything after that.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, like jazz was fine, but I just it didn't align with my heart the way that the first semester did. Yeah. And granted, the first semester we had a very engaging professor who actually knew his stuff, and my second semester this guy had to be at least 100, and he wouldn't stop touching it. Like he had a music stand that he would have his notes on for class, and it was just constantly up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, and it's just like, man, stop touching the stand, like focus on us. But it was very okay, and now Beethoven, like, oh, gee, it's like an infomercial every day.
I think we all had the same music history professor at one
Yeah,
point.
yeah.
About right.
Yeah. It doesn't matter what school you go to. There's always that one. Okay, you read any news scores lately? Yes. Like, good Lord. Okay,
Right.
so we're gonna get into the historical journey here. So, Pedro, can you just talk about like where Viola da Gamba, where those instruments come from?
All right. So before I tell the history of the instrument, I want to clear up one thing. People always say that this is like pre-cello and all pre-violin, and it has to do nothing with the cello at all. Maybe they're related as cousins. Okay, so the Viola da Gamba first started as a vihuela in Spain. Okay, you pluck the instrument and all that stuff, and guitar and all that stuff. Someone decided, we don't know exactly who, we don't have records, to add a bridge to the instrument and a bow, and you could play drones and stuff like that. So accompany a singer can sing and sustain notes and all that stuff. And then it went to Italy with someone in Spain became Pope, and they brought the instrument with them.
Oh.
And then someone in Italy decided, hey, we can make the bridge curved, and you can do more stuff with the instrument.
So we're making developments here.
So more developments came into the instrument, and then it gave more chance to actually play melody and play some chords and all that stuff, and that's what kind of developed. And then from that Pope and Italy and all that stuff, it went into other parts in Europe that kind of developed into the courts and all that stuff, into royalty and all that stuff. And so the Viola da Gamba is kind of associated a lot with royalty.
Okay.
At the beginning of it.
Okay. Cool. So, has it always been popular,
It was.
or
It
like
was-
did it like when it was created? Did it get at some time there was like a height of Viola da Gamba, and then it kind of like decayed a little bit?
Right. So this is all associated. It always goes to politics. So it starts like with royalty and all that stuff. That was the high point. It was in chords. The style of the time was that people enjoyed playing polyphony music in consorts. And a consort could be instruments of the same kind. So it could be like recorders, it could be viols, or it could be sackbuts. I mean, it was a combination of stuff. And this is what people were the style to do. And so it was associated with the courts and kings and all that stuff. And so people enjoyed this. And then from the courts and all that stuff, people would play in their houses, like after dinner and all that stuff. You had this instrument introduced into like the choir schools. And so every little singer knew how to play the gamba as well. And so that's how people were educated about it into it. When you start having the decline of royalty and like revolutions and all that stuff, you don't see the gamba as much because it's associated with royalty. And
Okay.
so like during the Commonwealth in England, that's when kind of the gamba died away. And that instrument.
So, I mean, probably what, 18th century, somewhere around there?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And so it started kind of going away. And then when did it start to try to like make its, I don't know, his revival, if you will?
Well, the gamba has always been around. I've seen people do some research about like existing like in the 18th, 19th centuries. It's not as a big thing, but it's always been around. It's always good to as a continual instrument to play with a harpsichord and pieces. But it was a revival of early music, and I think this was in the 1950s that people were finding this stuff very interesting, and that's what kind of brought it into play. Like people were like, oh wait, like there's this music that actually exists that was written like during Henry VIII time,
Right.
and all that stuff. And so like this brought it into, and then more people started studying and started making more professional recordings, and this is all sounding like cool, and it's oh look, it's very attainable as well.
Yeah. So does Houston have like a professional Viola da Gamba group that meets and rehearses?
Yes, and actually the founding member for it. And
Of course you are.
and it's called Les Touches, and we are the professional consort here in Houston. We established ourselves back in 2011 when I was a student at Jacobs School of Music in Indiana.
Okay. Okay. So Houston does have one, and then like in band world and orchestra we have TOTA and TMEA. Does Viola da Gamba have like an international society?
Yes, there's actually a national society called the Viola da Gamba Society of America. Their website is vdgsa.org. Also, there is a Houston chapter, which I'm president of, which is called Vows of Houston. And we have a website called houstonvows.org as well.
Okay, cool. All right, so we've talked about the history, we've talked about what it is. So let's talk about and shift gears and talk about how to physically play the instrument, how the techniques that go into it when you're teaching, introducing and teaching these to, say, like 7th graders for the first time. Just kind of give us your rundown of what and how you are teaching and what you're teaching them.
All right. So to begin with, I get students who I let them pick whatever size instrument they want. I try not to associate them to be like, oh, as a violin player, you have to play treble or anything like that. So I usually get a lot of bass players who want to play the treble, and I want to get like violin players who want to play the bass. So the first thing is to establish this is your new clef.
Yeah.
Oh,
And really
speaking
easy.
of clefs, is it all treble bass?
Treble, bass, and alto.
Okay, so there is alto clef.
Yes.
Okay, and which one plays an alto clef?
Tenor.
Tenor. Okay, cool. All right, keep going.
Yeah. And so I introduce them how to read music, and that's easy. So it's discovering where the notes are on the instrument now, like because they're used to playing violin, cello, bass, viola, and all that stuff, and I'm trying to get used to like okay, it's on this part of the instrument. Oh, and now you also have to learn 2 more strings because we used to 4 strings on our orchestra, and now you have 6 strings, unless you're like the French who have 7 strings on their instruments, and that's another story for another time.
The French. Yeah.
So the big thing is to talk, is to kind of, I teach them the bow hold first, which is kind of easier because it's underhand, and they get used to fingers to touch the hair that kind of controls the tension of the bow instead of so much relying on like screws and all that stuff. So they use that for their hands to control the tension of the instrument. I always find it's an easier bow hold than the orchestra one. I find more success with this one because it's not as complicated as the one where you're overhand and you have to make sure your thumbs are curved and all that stuff.
Well, back in the Renaissance, they're just like very simple people back then. It wasn't like, oh, we have symphony orchestras now and we're playing Beethoven music.
Right. And then teaching the students how to play the notes on the instrument. So they have to make sure they put their fingers right behind the frets, not on top of the frets, not in between the frets. It's right behind the fret, because then that way it lets the instrument speak out more and the sound comes out and it projects better that way. So that's what kind of teaching them. The biggest thing for them is they think a treble should sound like a violin. They think like a cello in the bass function. It's like, no, the sound is completely different than what it needs to. So it's more of a nasal sound, and I'll talk about that later. Why is that? But that's the big thing, is the sound adjustments. The bow holds different, and then just getting used to a different size.
Cool. So can we talk about the sound difference? You just mentioned it, and the kids having to get used to that different sound and that different timbre. What exactly is different, and how long does it take the kids to really kind of get over that and go, okay, and kind of I'm in orchestra and I'm also in this group, and now I've got to like differentiate between the sound profiles of what we got here?
It takes them a little while to get to that. It's not a big drastic change. So the biggest difference between a violin and a gamba sound is because the gamba has a flat back, which keeps the sound very nasally, compared to a violin and cello that has a more of a curved, so the sound projects more, so it's a bigger sound. So that's why the sound. So it's, I always consider it like you talk someone and then you talk a little bit nasally like that.
Okay.
And that's what the sound kind of changes into the gamba.
Cool. And then we talked earlier about you hold it with your legs.
Yes.
And I can only assume that. Well, let me ask you this. So, like in orchestral world, I know, like especially in junior high and the young kids, there's different sizes. Like you can get cellos that are smaller to fit the kid. Is viola da gamba instruments the same way, or is it like a one size?
No, it's an interesting. There's more range of sizes that I have seen. I have seen very tiny trebles, and I've also seen large trebles. And there's also tiny basses, and like so. There's no standard that says this is what the size needs to be. It's what's there, and it says like the range and all that stuff. And so many makers that have them. And that we get.
So you hear that, people? All you people that do the Suzuki method that start like 3-year-olds on violins and cellos, you can start them on viola da gamba too.
Exactly.
And yeah, and then the next thing you know, you have collegiate viola da gamba groups. Yeah. Okay, so when we come back, we're going to talk about why Pedro thinks viola da gamba and its continuance in the world of music is important, and then different ways and groups that he hears, maybe also his own group, and different ways to kind of hear it and where you can hear music and see groups for viola da gamba. So we'll be right back after this short break. All right, and we're back. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, with Pedro, why he believes that viola da gamba should continue in the society of music, why people should learn it, and maybe even more orchestral programs around the state or around the country should maybe explore picking this up and experiment with maybe even having their own viola da gamba group. So that way we're not the only school district in the state of Texas, apparently,
Right.
that has students playing this, which is great. It gives them another medium. It's kind of like when my band kids want to do symphony orchestra and they play with the orchestra. That's a different medium, and they get to play with a different set of people than just like band, and they have to learn to play a different way. So I can only assume that when you play in viola da gamba, you have to learn to play a different way with a different instrument. I'm assuming it's a smaller set of instruments as far as like numbers. Like you don't have a full orchestra.
Right.
How many is usually in a group of?
Between 3 and 6 is a typical number.
Oh, so you got to learn your part. You got to know your part. Like if the alto messes up, it's you. You can't hide from your friends. It's you. Oh,
exactly.
Wow. That's like chamber music.
Exactly.
Woof. Okay. Oh man. That scares me a little bit. But again, that's probably a reason why the kids can get a lot better, a lot faster, because they know, hey, I have to learn my part, because if my part's not learned, it's not so-and-so's fault, it's my fault, because I'm the only one playing that part. So can you just talk about why you think it's important that this continues on, and why people should join or create a viola da gamba group?
All right. So my biggest thing as an educator is always trying to teach the students independent thinking, and also to rely they can play music without necessarily me standing up there and conducting, like trying to teach it like it's a big chamber group. And so in viol consort, rule number 1 is there's no conductor. Okay. When I do the practice with the kids, I'm usually as a member as well too. So I'm playing along with the students. I'm playing a part, or a part that's not covered, taken care of. This teaches the kids independent thinking. Like you mentioned before, they're responsible for that part. There's no hiding it. There's no like 20-second violins and okay, I can hide.
Yeah, right, exactly.
It's like 1 or 2 people. Because at the beginning of this, I usually have kids doubling because I want to build their confidence up to say, I know how to play this instrument. I can do this. And then later on, we start developing into like, okay, I have 6 of you. Each one's going to get a different part. You got to build confidence. And so my big thing is that in consort music compared to like orchestra and quartets, it's democratic music. And what I mean by that is that everyone gets an equal say in the part. There is no viola part. There's no bass part. And not just the treble only gets the melody. The melody gets passed around to everybody. Everyone gets a chance to say something.
Yay, double bass players. They're like, finally, my time has arrived.
Exactly. That was my biggest thing. It was a bass
Yeah,
player.
'cause
You
you're a
play,
bass player.
you play the typical bass part in orchestra or whatever.
Boom, boom, boom,
And
boom.
then it's like, oh, wait, I can do other stuff? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And as a consort player, I forgot to mention, is you play one size, you can play them all. Like
Oh.
transfer information. So like when I started playing on bass viol, and then I went to like, hey, I can play the treble viol, and I can play this tiny little thing without having to play violin. And it's like, this is amazing and all that stuff. But my big thing is to teach like another way of chamber music and independent thinking for students in that way. And it takes them, a while to get used to it because they don't listen to like what I do, consort music all the time. And so it takes them.
Yo, man, what's the latest consort music on the radio? That's what I listen to on the way to work, bro.
Yes. Well, that happened today. I was in my office listening to some bird, and some kids came, this is what you listen to? And I said, yes, ma'am.
That's exactly what I listen to. I know. I'll always have kids like, hey, have you heard this song by Kendrick Lamar? And I go, does it have words? They're like, yeah. Nope. Like, I don't listen. A lot of the music I listen to is nerdy band and orchestra music. Like, that's what I listen to. That's just what I like to listen to.
All right.
You know.
And so the big thing, like in consort playing, that I actually enjoy, and I've seen this, I think been doing this now for 9 years, is that it also, there's no social hierarchy that's like, oh, you're in the top group and you're in the bottom group. Or you're like over here and all that stuff. Gamba consort is one group, and it's kids of different levels of playing, and they all become friends. They all get along. Like no one knows about like your background. Nobody cares about that. And we just all get together and we play music. And it's sometimes at the beginning, it's like it's people who like would never be friends, and then somehow by like 3-4 months, they're all buddies.
Right.
And this is what I enjoy about like this, because it's not just about playing there, but then they learn like in the music, like we all have something to say, and it's very important. Oh, look, it could take out into our friendship too, like, and say the same parts.
Well, it's more like a conversation.
Yes.
It's because everybody has the melodic line or has an important part. It's more like a conversation where everybody is contributing.
Yes, exactly. And so that's what I enjoy about concerts. So it just opens the door for other ways for people to socialize as well, and not just the same system of just like orchestra and you're in this level and you're this good or all this stuff. It's always open to kids who want to be in the top group or kids who are in the bottom group, whatever level they are. I'm always welcoming them in, and they always make it all work.
That's good, yeah. So what are some ways that people can explore Viola da Gamba out in our world?
All right. So I mentioned before that there was the Viola da Gamba Society of America. They usually have rentals available if people are interested in renting an instrument, trying it out and all that. The chapter here, the Viols of Houston, we also do some renting as well. So if people were interested in wanting to try the viol or stuff like that, they could always contact me, and I can give them access to an instrument and try it out. There's another group like Early Music of America, and those are connections and resources out there for people interested in this world.
Great. So if you have any questions for Pedro about anything we've talked about today, or you want to get his advice or help about how to get instruments or start a group or anything else like that, you can email him at Pedro at pfunes, PFUNES at dpisd.org. Or you could probably just Google them, because nowadays you can just Google anything and figure it out. Okay, so I really appreciate that that you're coming on to the show here and talking to us about Viola da Gamba. And I know we talked about your February 10th UK Zoom in Awesome Blossom presentation, but you also have another one later that same week, on the 13th at Rice University.
Yes.
So can you talk real quick about that one?
So I got a call from Chamber of Music of America, and they wanted me to do a presentation on the viol consort. Chamber of Music of America is a lot of people who like to play in string quartets, and that way, so this is kind of a different world setting. So this time I'm introducing to people what the gamba is, what the sound is, and then I'm going to have the high schoolers from Vows of Deer Park play a few selections, and I'll have my professional group, Les Touches, play a few selections of music, and hopefully at the end there'll be some sort of petting zoo so people get a chance to kind of try the viol.
So basically Thursday is like a real life demonstration of our conversation today.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, again, thank you, Pedro, for coming on. I appreciate it. You know, and it's kind of an interesting thing because I know you started this when you got here. How long have you worked here? This is 3 years. And you know, I was always like, I don't know what that is. I don't know what that is. And I would see pictures and I would see, you know, all that. I never saw videos, but I always would see pictures of like the students doing it and instruments. And then when I was thinking of, okay, this season, what topics could I talk about? I was like, ooh, I need to get Pedro to talk about Viola da Gamba because I don't know what that is. And so it was great to be able to have you come on and kind of share with us for a little bit on what that is and why you think it's important. And I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. Abby, do you have anything else you want to ask before we leave?
No, that was really
Informative. I'm ready to write a thesis now.
Yeah, I would like to try it. I think it sounds interesting.
Just don't tempt him with a good time.
I know.
You'll be. I can't go to this band thing. I have a Viola da Gamba rehearsal. I can't.
Exactly.
I can't. I have rehearsal.
Or if you ever need a percussionist, you know,
Yeah.
I'm available.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
a
we
vial ready for you.
Yes. Spreading the gospel one person at a time. Yes. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for tuning in, and tune in next week. Next week we're going to have one of our teachers on, and we're going to talk about classroom management, which I think is something that every teacher needs to look at and make sure that they have the correct or good strategies for them and for their classes and their students, to make sure that the way that they want their classes to be set up as far as the policies and procedures that they want to have put in, that they are actively trying to make sure that they're executing their game plan. So join us next week when we talk with Ms. Rodriguez on classroom management. All right, we'll see you until then. Peace.
This has been another episode of Notes and Notables with your host, Trenton Petrie. Join us next time as we dive into another set of educational topics with a brand new guest. But until then, school's out.